joining. I am Gene Park with the Washington Post. Chat, I see you. And indeed, Odin is with us, or not really quite Odin, but we do have the creative director of Assassin's Creed Valhalla with us, Ashraf Ismail. And he's going to be talking about some gameplay details. Straight up, I'm going to be honest with you guys. We won't have new gameplay footage. We won't. But I'm going to be asking a ton of gameplay questions. And I'm looking at the chat right now. Odin is indeed with you all, and I will be more than happy to try to forward some questions to Ashraf from the chat. But first, we're going to talk a little bit about real quickly about today's news. And joining me today, first of all, I want to introduce the whole team here. We got Mikhail and Mike, and we are the Launcher crew of the Washington Post. Mike, what is Launcher?
So, fancy you should ask. Launcher is the dedicated home for video game coverage at the Washington Post. So we started in October, been having some fun with it since, and we got this great new live show to come at you and hit you with some new knowledge. So it's been fun. Glad you're with us.
Awesome. And we also, so Mike is my boss and editor, and we also have another editor, Mikhail Klementov. Mikhail, how's it going, man?
Going great. This is kind of a fun cosmic coincidence. Odin, the All-Father, the One. In Russian, the word Adin, which is transliterated in roughly the same way, that word is literally one. That's the number one. And I wonder if that's some cultural cross-pollination, the Vikings really got around, or if it's just a coincidence, but we're just having fun today.
I was not aware of that.
Maybe we'll learn more in the game, because Assassin's Creed is always really, they try to go for historical accuracy. But we're gonna go real quick into the news. And secondly, we're gonna ask a question at the end to you, chat. Which time period do you guys want Assassin's Creed to be in next? I have my own opinions. I'm sure we all do. And but in the meantime, let's talk about the new announcements that we had this week. First of all, on Monday, Tony Hawk 1 and 2 being remade. This was such a huge deal for me because I grew up on the Tony Hawk series. I played hours and hours of Tony Hawk in my college dorm room, just like nonstop. To see, that I made this point yesterday that Tony Hawk games are really, really just like a Mario game. They're not really a skating game because they said in the stream, in Jeff Keighley's stream, that you're kind of like a superhuman skateboarder. And that's really about it. No one can really do what you can do in Tony Hawk, but you feel like a pro skater. That's pretty much what it is.
Yeah, no, this is definitely big news. You mentioned college. I mean, vivid memories of playing some Tony Hawk in college, but I mean, growing up, I was more of a skate or die man myself on my old Commodore 64. So when that gets remastered, I'll be down.
Yeah.
Honestly, I've never even heard of what you just said. That's old stuff.
Much like myself.
I love that this news broke in a text from Tony Hawk, which is just incredible. First of all, just the idea of getting a text from Tony Hawk, and he's like, hey, guess what? These games you love, they're coming back. It's very, of all the people I think online who have this reputation for being like papas, Tony Hawk definitely deserves it.
Yeah. I mean, Tony Hawk last year, he started this whole text message thing. It's pretty similar to what Ninja does. Like you text him and then you're basically locked into like this SMS spam network and I guess Tony Hawk decided to this is obviously his biggest announcement ever. Most people know Tony Hawk through the video games, so I'm. It's sorry to say, but Tony Hawk, the game is definitely mainstream skate culture. I mean, like I was part of the skate culture back in the day, so I'm super excited for this. Not really much.
Did anyone in this chat actually skateboard?
No.
Any skaters here?
Myself.
There's a lot of people who love tree parkour, so we'll definitely ask about that. It's an interesting thing because, like for me, like the parkour in like games like the older Assassin's Creed are a lot like Tony Hawk, in which you're kind of like mixing and matching different moves to move smoothly through an environment. But anyways,
Very smooth, tying it all together.
Very smooth transition into inside Xbox, right? We also had reveals from, well, this morning, Unreal Engine. We had our first real look at Unreal Engine 5, and it was reportedly they claim running on the PlayStation 5. So this is really our first gameplay look and running on an actual PlayStation 5 hardware with PlayStation 5 chipset. They don't have the final build for the PlayStation 5. Epic and Tim Sweeney said that they still don't know what the damn thing looks like, and neither do we. But this is actually what we saw in the PS5, and this came at an interesting time after last week's Inside Xbox reveals, where it was kind of hyped up for a little bit, and a lot of people were expecting a little bit more, and we got kind of the same thing. People are making this into an Xbox versus like PS5 thing, especially since the PlayStation brand was attached to the Unreal announcement. Fact of the matter is, Unreal games are going to be out for everything, including your phone and your TV and your Xbox and your PlayStation. It's not a thing. It just so happened that the PS5 just landed that little sweet spot. Yeah, there's a lot of talk about like what to expect from the next generation and what graphics look like.
Yeah, and obviously we got a good look at the game we'll be talking about today, Assassin's Creed Valhalla. There was also that kerfuffle about what exactly was being delivered. That we didn't. It was a little unclear. Some mixed messages there about are we going to see gameplay? Are we going to see cinematics? And I think one of my biggest takeaways was different than that, which was I'm curious how the visuals from the next gen games themselves are going to resonate with us just through this digital means. Like if I'm watching this presser, like is 4K, and frame rate going to be like, oh wow, that's so much different than what I'm normally seeing on my 4K TV back there. Like I don't think it really is. I think the biggest differentiator for the next gen is going to be that hands-on experience, like those really short load times. The fact that games are going to be more open and dynamic and remove a lot of those barriers for developers, which I'm excited to hear about in a little bit. I think that's where it's really going to stand out.
What strikes me as like a huge challenge with what you bring up though is that we're in a time where obviously a lot of people are not going to be getting those hands-on experiences.
Right.
There aren't any big events where they'll have like, oh, we have the London Philharmonic Orchestra playing the theme of war, whatever. There's none of these embellishments, and so all of these presentations have to rely very much solely on the merits of what's being presented. I'm really curious how marketing departments, how developers themselves are kind of thinking about that and adapting their rollouts around that.
Yeah, it's hard. And then to Mike's point, and to the reaction that I'm seeing on Unreal, for me when I saw the Unreal demo last night, for me the difference was really stark. But I'm seeing the comments, and some people aren't really able to see the difference between like what we saw with the Unreal
Rutro
demo, not a real game, Demonstration 2. For me, I think the real game that's really going to be kind of like the in between is The Last of Us 2. And it's going to play a similar role that The Last of Us 1 did. When The Last of Us 1 came out, a lot of people were like, well, we don't really need next gen because this looks fantastic. And then it did look really, really good for a while. It still looks great. I think we're probably going to look at The Last of Us 2 and be like, oh yeah, that was kind of like the beginning of like when we kind of started to see a real shift in clarity and everything.
I think one of the other kind of difficulties here is I think past presentations kind of set up the next generation for failure almost, in that every previous E3 presentation, it's all running on the highest possible specs, some stuff that's not attainable on a home console or a home device. And so the expectations from older games and all of the trailers and presentations and marketing material, all of that is the highest possible fidelity. And now you have developers coming out with the next generation and they're saying, no, this is for real. This is the good stuff. And there's both a gap in trust, and also if you put the marketing material side by side, there's not that big a difference, even if the actual experience of playing will be totally different.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah,
exactly.
and Mikhail, to your point, there's so much history with this. I saw someone say before that the PS2 promised us the Final Fantasy VIII ballroom scene, but in gameplay, and we definitely didn't get that until at least the PS3. So, at the very least, we're going to see some marginal jumps. but to transition, one of the biggest games, probably the biggest game that we know of today that's going to be in the next generation, is the Assassin's Creed series. And we have Ashraf here. We're going to say bye to Mike for a little bit, and we're going to bring Ash in. The chat is going crazy, saying, "Bring Ash. Where is the god Ash? How long are they going to keep stalling? We're not stalling anymore. Ash is here. There's Ash."
Hello.
I want to introduce Ash here and add a little bit to me. Ash is currently the creative director of Assassin's Creed Valhalla, but he was also the game director, correct me if I'm wrong, for Assassin's Creed Origins and Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag, both of which happen to be my two favorite Assassin's Creed games. So,
Amazing.
As soon as I found that out, I was like, okay, now my expectations are a little bit unreasonably high for you right now in terms of what Valhalla.
Okay, I'll do my best to live up to those expectations.
Yeah. But thanks so much for joining us here.
Of course, it's my pleasure to be here.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about let's transition real quick into what the next generation could bring. You worked on Black Flag, and Black Flag was also a transitional game. It was a launch game for the Xbox One. I was going to say One X, but the Xbox One and the PS4. And like I remember Unity afterwards was really ambitious with like crowds and details. Everyone knows the church and how much work went into that. What kind of how is the next gen going to handle Valhalla basically?
I mean, we're excited for sure that we're at that cusp of this new generation coming out. Because these machines are immensely powerful and they can do some really incredible things. And Assassin's Creed has always been, from the very early years, Assassin's Creed has always been committed to new technology, because at the end of the day, these powerful machines allow us to create much more immersive experiences. And that's what we're after, is to draw people in these historical contexts that we cannot visit today. To be able to realize that with higher fidelity, removing as much of the friction with that immersion as possible, this is wonderful for us, and it's wonderful for our players, of course. So we're really excited for that. We've been working for quite some time now, knowing that this console transition was coming, and Valhalla is prepared for that.
So actually, I think before we even get any further, give us the elevator pitch for Valhalla. Like, what is it? What are your expectations and ambitions? Tell us all about it.
Real quick, I just want to address the chat. The chat, I see your questions, so keep it going. Keep spamming Odin. We're seeing your questions, and we'll definitely get to them. So don't worry about it, chat. Anyway, sorry, Ash. Go ahead.
Okay, so no worries. So the elevator pitch. Assassin's Creed Valhalla is it's the Viking experience within the Assassin's Creed world, and there's two major elements to that. Of course, it's the Viking experience, and here we want to bring it to the level that Assassin's Creed is known to do. So something that's nuanced, that's anchored in the history and in the world, something that is realized to a degree that we haven't seen yet. So there's a really incredible opportunity to showcase a time period and a culture and a pivotal moment in history that I think we've rarely seen in video games and in media in general. And then that's within the Assassin's Creed world. So what's really important for us here is that we've looked at the whole franchise. We've gone back. Let's say, there's a discussion around new Assassin's Creed and the old Assassin's Creed. For us, what was important actually is that the brand has had some really incredible greatness across its whole tenure. And our challenge that we gave ourselves is, well, how do we bring back that uniqueness that existed from the first Assassin's Creed? How do we honor and respect that lore, this universe, this incredible franchise? So I've gone beyond the elevator pitch at this point, but you know, we want to bring the Viking fantasy, the Viking experience to a level that just hasn't been seen yet inside the Assassin's Creed world. That's kind of the high level, let's say, pitch for it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's fine that you went long because, you know, if anyone wasn't sure of your passion around this, I think they are now. You mentioned kind of historical fidelity and legacy and lore. And one of the things I'm really curious about is the historical research that went into making this game. And I remember watching the trailer and being really struck by these green gem-like things that are embedded into the armor of the protagonist. And it got me thinking, like, is that a real thing? Is this something I just had never thought about or known about? How deep did you get when you were doing the research to put together this fully realized world?
Vikings had materia back then. That's
well, so we set onto this time period and this kind of Viking experience quite early on, and very quickly started discussing with various historians, doing a lot of research, and we ended up going on even doing a quite an amazing tour of Norway and England. Our game takes place in the 9th century Norway and Dark Ages of England, and so that trip that we took was incredibly powerful and meaningful for us to consume the culture, the history, the time period, the locales. One of my most cherished moments was we spent a few days in Norway and met some really amazing people, did a lot of really intriguing interviews. And it was a bit cold, and we see that people really live on the coastlines. That's where you can live because the rest of it is there's a lot of mountains. So not the most forgiving place to live, let's say, but people were doing well there, and it was cold. And then after that, we ended up going to England, and at some point in England, we were on a longship rowing, and there was a steeple in the distance and these beautiful emerald green rolling hills, and we were all overcome by that feeling of coming from this majestic mountainous place to all of a sudden seeing sheep and rolling hills and having that feeling of there's opportunity here, there's farmland, and so we felt it deep down. So definitely a lot of effort has gone into the research, and again, it's really important for us to showcase a time period and a culture that is known maybe in a very mainstream way, you know, one word, Vikings, but not in its details and not in its nuances. And so it was really important for us to try to understand as much as we can so that we can infuse it directly, indirectly into the game. You mentioned the hidden blade and I guess the gems. Here, I mean, there's some clues as to let's say the whereabouts of where that blade comes from. So that's a little hint for people. But yes, a lot of detail has gone into the building of Valhalla.
awesome. Well, now that you mentioned the hidden blade, maybe we can shift a little bit towards more the gameplay side. All of the questions that we're getting on gameplay, gameplay questions, chat. I see a question, so I'm going to ask the one that I have. You know, like you said, like you're talking. It was like I went like this when you're talking about the original Assassin's Creed, because as a fan since part one, like it's music to my ears because I really enjoyed the stealth gameplay. And the social stealth, right? And to see Stephen Totillo's piece in Kotaku mention that one hit kills are coming back, and social stealth is being kind of reconfigured in some ways, wonderful. There was also a lot of criticism about the map size in Odyssey and the amount of things to do. Some thought that there was just too much content and might have been a little bit overwhelming. Origins really didn't have that, so it was an interesting kind of contrast. Even the Origins was vast and huge as well. Can you speak to the size of Valhalla's map and how it might compare to Odyssey and Origins?
Yeah, so the map size, one thing is I do get asked quite often to compare, and I've said it before, I don't find the comparison directly meaningful.
Yeah.
Instead, what I would say is we're in Norway and in England. Norway is breathtaking. It's a big world. There's a lot to discover and do in Norway. And then eventually the journey takes you to England. And in England, we have four kingdoms of England. During this time period, England was broken up into many little kingdoms. And so we have four kingdoms: Northumbria, East Anglia, Mercia, and Wessex. Within those, there's three major cities: London, Winchester, York, or York, as it's known now, with a ton of towns and villages and hamlets and locations and surprises, all the way from Hadrian's Wall to Stonehenge. The world is impressive. And the reason I'm not a huge fan of comparing is actually, it's to say, we didn't start out by comparing. When we do the development of this game, we're not looking at, what we've previously done or other games to sort of say, well, how big should the map be? No, the way we start is, this is the intention. This is the journey that we have. We have a vision of what we want this game to be about. And at that point, it becomes about, well, what's the content we need to deliver this journey and that vision? And that's what we focus on. So people don't need to, let's say, worry about the size. It's England, it's big. There's four kingdoms in it, and a ton of content, and Norway, and some other surprises that we're not yet talking about. But the content is really there to fulfill a specific journey that we had in mind, that we have been building from the very beginning.
That's great you say that, because like we compare map sizes. Like some people loved Odyssey. The game got so much engagement over a long period of time, so people clearly loved having so much to do, and then some people just didn't like that. So to compare and contrast is really hard to see how you might feel about the game without, I guess, really knowing what's in it, right? So
to that end,
go ahead.
Go ahead. Sorry. No, you're the creative director. You speak.
No, again, just to say, the game, we've built a game with a journey in mind, but also a world that we want people to discover all the nuances and the discoveries that they can make. We've filled this world with a lot of mystery and surprise and unexpected elements. But this is a meticulously handcrafted large world that we've built. So again, for the people who want to spend hours and hours exploring every nook and cranny and finding every secret and hidden truth in this world, they have those options. If you want to focus on the narrative and drive through the narrative, you can play it that way too, and that's cool. So again, we've built an incredible world, but again, with a journey in mind.
So now I do have to ask, you have left this tasty morsel of journey and vision on the table. Can you tell us more about, at a very high level, what was this journey you envisioned? What was the vision that kind of took you down this design path?
So I'll go with early on stuff. Of course, I can't get into too much details about the journey. We don't want to spoil anything for our players, but very early on, again, we decided to go to the Viking Age and the 9th century specifically, because it was a turning moment. We felt it was a very pivotal moment in the history of England and Europe. So we started with that notion. Our Assassin's Creed has always been fundamentally about these two sort of groups, the Assassins and the Templars, who are sort of these hidden figures in society that puppeteer these moments in time that change history or are pivotal moments in history, and that's where we settled on. And then through our research and through learning about the cultures and the people, we decided that we wanted to tell a tale from a Viking perspective, from a Norse person, from their perspective, how that person who has a journey, who has this is a Viking, Eivor, our hero. This is a Viking raider who will leave Norway due to wars and dwindling resources. And they go to settle their people in England. And this was something that happened a lot in the 9th century, from the Scandinavian world into England. And so we wanted that to be at the heart of the experience, something that's important, but through a very personal perspective. And so Eivor's journey is one of a clan leader, as I said, a raider, but someone who is out for their own glory, someone who has ambitions. And we wanted that personal story in this really big epic, journey in history, and you meet kings and you fight chieftains and you ally with different people, but at the heart of it, it's a personal journey of someone who is struggling with this notion of the self versus the community. And so we always try to put that very personal spin on it. That was the intention here. And then very quickly within that, of course, our hero gets embroiled in that conflict I mentioned about these two groups. And so we wanted to showcase what does that conflict look like from a third perspective. That's where Eivor comes in. And of course, Eivor has an impact on this conflict, something that is critical and important, that we won't spoil. But that's sort of the reflection. It was really looking at the history, understanding what we wanted to say, and how do we deliver the Norse culture and what happened that was important in history, but through a personal perspective, through a personal lens.
Okay, so I'm gonna pivot to a couple of really quick questions about gameplay. The chat is super excited, and to start off with, I am part of the reason why you guys keep releasing Assassin's Creed games every year, because I would buy every single one like without even questioning it. So I have a lot of questions myself about the gameplay. But the number one question that the chat is asking is what is the parkour going to look like? And will there be tree parkour? But yeah, I mean, like that's interesting to me because like Odyssey kind of removed a lot of it. Origins kind of like had some of it, but then Unity had like a really developed system, and Black Flag did as well. So it's interesting to see like where the series goes with movement. So I'll let you talk.
Yeah. So when it comes to parkour, the big reflection with parkour, but also with stealth and with combat, with a lot of our core gameplay in this game was we needed to craft locations that make those elements shine. So there's a lot of effort that's gone into the level design, where we have developed explicit purpose into whatever location or area that we're trying to build. Say, yes, you can run on the ground and you can do whatever you need to, maybe from the ground, but you know what? If you decide to go up, if you decide to be a predator from the top, you're gonna see the value, see the advantage that you have. So a lot of effort has gone into parkour from that perspective. But it's the same with we have a crazy amount of ingredients in this world, things that make combat shine, things that make stealth shine, things that make navigation shine. So that was kind of the early on reflection that we had was, okay, we build these open worlds. You can approach these worlds from many angles, many directions, but how do we give them intention and purpose and make sure that this location is unique and memorable because of that intention? This was a very early direction that we had taken to make sure that, again, the player's time is valued, that you get to experience different things by exploring the world, that exploring the world itself is meaningful for narrative reasons, but also for gameplay reasons and experience reasons. And we infuse that across every location we have in this world. I've mentioned a few times, this is a meticulous building that we've gone through to make sure that we can achieve it to the scale of the world that we have. So a lot of effort has gone into parkour. We have some really incredible locations that shine when you decide to be, let's say, the predator at the top, or even some navigation puzzles, stuff like that. So people can look forward to that with parkour.
Yeah, and my own big personal question, and this is part of why I actually love Assassin's Creed Unity so much. Unity is actually probably my third or favorite in the whole series, because it really went back to what AC1 was about, and it had those black box style open-ended like stealth missions. So to hear you say that you're developing these areas where it allows for that is exciting. But like how would stealth look like? Because obviously the series has kind of moved away from that more towards an action RPG. But you mentioned in the Kotaku article, he is a Viking that's trying to penetrate this other the type of society. So like we'd love to hear a little bit more about any details you can tell us about what stealth and some of these whether black box the sandbox style missions might come back.
Yeah. So about stealth, so one let's say misconception that people have is that Vikings are only brutal warriors, and for sure they are quite
I had
quite
that
a warrior.
misconception too. So yeah.
Yeah, that's what the mainstream public has. That's the image people have in their mind when they hear the word Vikings. Um, but they were very pragmatic. If they could stealth their way to an objective and do whatever it is they needed to do quietly, they would. There's no reason to risk your ship. There's no reason to risk your people or yourself if you didn't have to. The big difference, culturally speaking, is that if you were to do something in stealth, then after the fact, you would highlight it. You would talk about it and show it off. You wouldn't hide it. So that's let's say the cultural spin on it. Having said that, the stealth approach this is an Assassin's Creed game, so the stealth approach is critical. And I mentioned that we had done this big reflection, off on the franchise as a whole, and part of that reflection very early on was to say the social stealth element was one of the uniqueness, one of the very strong unique pillars of Assassin's Creed, and so we actively we were excited to bring it back and to bring its own unique new spin. And how do we make it even better? And how do we give the people who love that style of play something meaningful, powerful, with different abilities and tools and capacities to play in that style. So yes, social stealth is one of those approaches in terms of stealth, bringing back stealth. You have a hood and a cloak that you can manually break up and down as you wish. And
yes, that's all I needed here.
Yes,
I just need removable cloak. That's it.
And that has an effect. On detection and that kind of stuff and more.
Oh, it does.
And of course,
that's awesome. Wow.
Oh yeah, of course. It's more than just cosmetic. And there's other tools and capacities. There's tools with your Raven, Sunin, that help you in stealth situations. So everything from the sort of the ground stealth, let's say, stalking zones, hiding, all the way to social stealth, using other people, using the environment and the social setting to sort of hide in the crowd. So a lot of effort has gone into stealth. There's of course there's the historical precedent of that Vikings did do that. But of course, again, this is an Assassin's Creed game. So very early in the experience of the game, Eivor will meet with assassins, or the hidden ones as they're called. And they will have an active role in helping.
Origins tie there. I love it.
Yes,
okay.
Of course.
Yeah.
These assassins will also actively teach Eivor certain things. So some of the stealth elements will come as a teaching from Eivor's assassin friends.
Awesome. A couple more questions. This kind of is a double-sided question. Would love to hear more about whether this is going to be more of an RPG. Is there going to be a loot grind like there was in Odyssey, or is it going to be like more named uniques like we saw in Origins, or something different? And also, like, how is combat going to look? Origins and Odyssey had very similar combat versus the countering, the very counter-heavy system that we saw in the previous games. So I'm wondering whether there's any kind of change in that. In those.
Okay, so I'll start with the RPG question. So RPG, I mean, there's different facets of RPG. I'll start by saying on the let's call it the role playing aspect. In terms of role playing, we now have dialogue choices and choice in the game. And this was something that we actively tried to say, how do we embed that in a universe that says you're reliving the DNA memories of someone. So that was an important reflection that we had made. And part of the conclusion of that is that we wanted to tell the story of Eivor, and that Eivor is a very defined character, someone who is complex, determined, introspective. This is a very defined character, and we wanted to allow our players to have a voice within that framework of character. So the idea is all the choices you get to make and all the things you get to say in this game are things that Eivor would say or do at any given moment. And that's sort of the role-playing aspect, if you will. In terms of progression and gear and all that, we wanted to take a fresh look on progression, bring something new. So in terms of gear, let's say every piece of gear is unique. Every piece of gear, you can upgrade it, you can change the look of the gear. So it's more of a collection of gear. If you want to focus on one set, if you have your favorite set of weapons, your favorite gear, and you want to just have that and focus on it, no problem. You can go through the whole game with that. If you want to collect all the really wonderful, unique weapons and gear we have in the game, you can do that. But each piece is unique. In terms of continuing on this progression discussion, the real difference in the progression style here is really more about play style. We wanted players to sort of play the game as they want. Yes, there is a specific journey that you go on. There's a roller coaster that Eivor goes through. But the approach to fight or stealth, we wanted players to have a voice within that. And so the progression system is more built to feed the playstyle kind of wishes of our players, to be able to sort of really more handcraft your character, your Eivor to a specific playstyle that you enjoy. So if you're a player that really wants to focus on the narrative and just drive through the narrative, you can do that. If you want to explore the gameplay potential of Eivor and you want to spend time doing that, you can do that as well. Again, the focus here was we're giving this big Viking experience to our players. Let them play it the way they want. Let them experience the journey that we've crafted for them, to the capacity that they would want.
Is countering coming back? How are you able to talk about combat and see how that looks?
Combat,
that was definitely something that I was most looking forward to in the trailer last week, and we didn't see too much of it. So we'd love to hear any details you can provide on that.
Yeah. So combat. So combat. You can't really claim to make the Viking experience without nailing combat. The Viking Age Vikings were brutal warriors. So a lot of effort has gone into that sense of impact, the feeling of feeling every swing of the weapon. And again, in terms of customizing the way you play, one of the areas we wanted to push is the idea of dual wielding, that you can combine any two combination of weapons as you want. Some weapons have synergies with one another, so there's a lot of nitty-gritty crafting if you wish to go down that road. A lot of effort has gone into the dual wielding. If you want to dual wield two shields, you can do that. Why not?
Very Dark Souls like it, actually. Yeah.
There's at a certain point, we have two-handed weapons. You can gain skills that allow you to wield in a single hand two-handed weapons, and then combine two of them if you want. So again, a lot of effort has gone into the dual wielding and to allow that level of customization and gameplay synergy. And then the other major push has been on the enemies. One thing we've seen, and we saw it with Origins, is some people put a lot of hours into these games. And so it was really important for us to say, okay, how do we make sure that if you've been playing for 15, 20 hours, 25 hours, that you can still be surprised? Enemies can do unexpected things. And so a lot of work has gone into pushing enemy variety, whether it's using each other, using the environment, using a plethora of tools and ingredients that they carry on them. We wanted that the enemies were an intriguing challenge for the player, that you can be surprised by what they can do. So so those are let's say the two main axes that we've pushed combat. The weaponry, the sense of impact, the sense of swinging these weapons, and the enemy design, and how far we push that.
I have one real last question that a lot of the chat is wondering too, and I'm wondering too. What does character customization look like? We mentioned Hood, which is awesome. Eivor is bearded, the male version of him, anyways. People are asking, can you change the color of armor, or like what pieces are going to work? Can you talk about how that kind of armor and equipment might work?
Yeah, sure.
And how deep would character customization would look like? People love to be able to characterize their tunes, right? So.
Yeah, of course. So yes, there's quite a few options for customization. So yes, the gear pieces are broken up into 5 separate pieces, where let's say the hood is one piece among many. So there's various pieces. Again, as I've mentioned, every piece of gear is unique. When you upgrade gear, at certain moments, that gear also changes its visual. We allow you, if you really want to customize the look, we allow you to swap the look of a piece of gear, so you can retain its capacities, but you can change the look.
Yes,
transmog.
Yes.
So we have that. In terms of the Eivor, so yes, there's hairstyles, beard styles, quite various amount. You can change the color. There's tattoos, there's war paint. So there's quite a bit of, let's say, character customization that can be done.
I'll let Mikhail talk, because otherwise this is just you and me, Ash, just talking. So, Mikhail, you got a question?
I'm the loving recipient of all of these answers about gameplay. I love it. We're going to get to chat questions in a second. They've been asking a lot of questions. I want to ask about kind of gameplay more broadly as like a subject. You tweeted about this earlier. A lot of fans are excited to see gameplay, and we're kind of frustrated to not see it. And you called for patience and kindness, and I think we should reiterate that right here. I would venture that some of that frustration comes from development and marketing cycles being kind of opaque. Most players not really knowing how any of that works. And so I'm curious, what steps and decisions go into going from the very first part of a marketing rollout, which is just saying, this game exists. Hey, here's the name, it's real, to actually showing people gameplay footage.
I'm a creative director. I'm a developer. My focus is on building the game and building this experience, and kind of setting the vision and the intentions of this experience. And that's my primary focus. We have marketing teams that it's their job to market the games. People need to, again, when I say have patience with us, people need to remember we just announced the game about 2 weeks ago. There's a long road in front of us. People should not at all doubt, will they see a plethora of gameplay? Yes, it's coming. The thing that I think most people don't realize, let's say from a development standpoint, is there is a need to pace that out, because at some point the team needs to be focused on building the game and focused on that. And that's where my energy goes, and my team's energy goes, is into building that game, and making sure we can reach moments where we can say, hey, you know what, we're going to take a chunk of that game and show it to people, whether it's to be able to see a trailer or to be able to even have a hands-on with it. Our focus on the development side is, no, the game is number one. That's the first thing we need to focus on. We need to ship. And of course, knowing that at certain moments in the marketing campaign, we're going to take a chunk of that and let people consume it and see it and give us feedback on it. So these are, there's a lot of time in front of us. People will see quite a lot. I promise that before the game launches. And again, all I ask is for a bit of patience and some kindness. We adore what we do. We're excited. We're absolutely excited to show off what we've been working on. We spend years on these projects. it means a lot to us to show off the game and have people feed off of it. We feed off that energy. But again, within due time, it'll come. Don't worry about that.
It is hard to be able to dedicate, as far as I know, it takes a lot of resources to be able to pull a vertical slice out of a game and make it into a trailer. So, that does kind of sound familiar.
I mean, it's there's work to do, but again, when the game is in a great place, being able to do that is much easier. And our focus right now is we're building the game as we speak. I mean, we're quite far ahead. We have the full experience of the game. So now it's really about polishing it and debugging it and making sure it shines to the degree that we need it to and we expect it to. And again, that's my focus. That's what I'm doing 99% of the day.
Yeah. One thing we wanted to ask about, we had heard through the grapevine that there's such a thing as Viking rap battles, and that there's a possibility that might play a part in this game. I'll let you handle that one. Can you tell us a bit more about this?
Yeah, sure. So what you're referring to is called flighting. So flighting was something that we found in our research. It was something that was done during this time period in the 9th century on the Norse side, so the Viking side, but also in the Saxon side in England, in mead halls, for fun, for enjoyment. People, let's say 2 people, would start rhythmically insulting one another in front of the crowd to people's cheers. There's even a saga, a story about Odin and Thor doing a flighting together, where Odin, of course, Odin the Wise, obliterating Thor. So it was really based on that research that we found this kind of really intriguing little activity. And just to kind of give a little hint as to onto Eivor's personality, Eivor is someone who appreciates a good joke, but also appreciates a sense of poetry, and so it fit really well in terms of the character we were developing and building, that this activity sort of can take place. So yes, flighting, modern day rap battles, is something that you can find in the game.
Have you done any flighting internally as a development team? Anything you can demonstrate for us now?
Oh no, now you're putting me on the spot. Not one of my skills, I have to admit. Not one of my skills. And I would feel bad because I'd have to insult you pretty badly publicly. And I couldn't do that just now. I'm not that kind of guy.
I'll allow it, but Ash is being magnanimous. So. We're almost wrapped up here, but I do want to get to a couple quick rapid fire questions from the chat.
Sure. Yep.
Double assassinations, will that be coming back anytime?
So as we've mentioned, there are skills. So, yeah. There are skills to gain. Eivor has a hidden blade. There are skills that can help you in your assassination capacities, but we're not going into those details just yet.
Okay. Any mounts besides horses? And ships, I guess.
Yes, there's the long ship, if you can call it a mount. There are other mounts, but again, we're not getting into that just yet.
Yoshi confirmed. Got it. Okay. And then is there multiplayer? I'm gonna probably guess not, because multiplayer has been missing. But Elise, our other reporter, is also a huge fan of Assassin's Creed, and she's a huge fan of multiplayer.
So Assassin's Creed Valhalla is a single player game. We do have an online component. There is a lot of value and a lot of features that come with being online. But to be clear, it is a single player game, and we thrive on that single player experience that we're trying to make. Again, we have an incredible Viking experience and a journey that we've been excited to put out there, and that's the focus of our efforts.
And as a lore fan of Assassin's Creed, who's actually read the comic books and everything, how much you probably can't talk about this, I'm gonna guess, but whatever you can to mention about the modern day, like what are those aspects gonna look like? how much of it might we see? How much of it might be a continuation of the Odyssey's DLC in Atlantis? Might we see Bayek again someday? Or but yeah, basically, like, what is the modern day gonna look like? Because like you mentioned, old and new Assassin's Creed fans. A lot of old fans really dug the modern day, or at least very much miss it.
So in terms of modern day, we do continue the journey with Layla. So after the events of Odyssey, we pick up a bit of time has passed since then. Of course, I can't go into any of those details. There are some really cool surprises, I think, for fans and non-fans. Certain gameplay that is an aspect, if I can call it that, for the present day that will, I think, surprise and hopefully thrill people. So let's say that's that on the present day for now. In terms of the lore, you mentioned being a lore fan. One thing I will say is it was, again, in this early reflection of the game, it was important for us to say, okay, how does this game, how does Valhalla sit within this brand? What we didn't want to do is just kind of have, let's say, Easter eggs of lore. We wanted something much more meaningful, something that is really sectioned into the rest of the franchise, and that you can feel the existence of the other games, and you can feel the existence of Valhalla within those other games. So it was critical for us to say, you know what, this, the Viking experience in the Assassin's Creed world, that there is a lot of meaning within that statement. So in terms of lore and that kind of stuff, again, we've really tried to say, if you're someone who loves that kind of stuff, there is plenty for you to find. And again, we're not necessarily talking about Easter eggs, we're talking about meaningful stuff. And hopefully, if Valhalla is your first game, hopefully that gets you interested. Hopefully that excites something within you that you want to dig in and understand this universe. So yeah, that's what I'll say about lore and present day.
That actually tells me a lot. That's really exciting because, like, even Assassin's Creed Revelations, which I think actually has the best story out of the whole series, like part of what I love about it is because exactly what you said. You just took those words. It acknowledges the realities and the events of previous games, and what happened before and after kind of lives on through the events that you experience. So that
well,
connection.
I'll take the moment to highlight one of our narrative director, Darby. He was the lead writer on Revelations and also Black Flag. He's my partner in crime in all of this. It's maybe not fair to say there's a lot of really amazing, talented people. But Darby and I, very early on, we set our intentions. We kind of set, what is this journey, and again, how is this game rooted in the franchise? And so it's something that he and I have worked on quite tediously, meticulously over the last since the beginning of this production. So it's been 2.5 years, and again, a lot of love and effort and care has gone into that building.
Well, you're gonna make me tear up because it's like Darby is such a great writer too. So to have him back is also really encouraging too.
He's amazing. He's a talent, talent and a half.
And also real quick, people are asking about the engine. A lot of talks about engine today. Will it use similar engine to Origins and Odyssey, or is this something, a new iteration that you guys might have?
Well, this is the Anvil Next 2 engine. But at this point, and I would say in this generation, the way things have gone forward, the technology is something that has become way more modular. So, adding in, let's say, a new rendering engine within that same, let's say, larger framework, this is sort of the way that technology and software has been improving. So there's a lot of work that's gone into this game. I guarantee you this is going to be the most beautiful Assassin's Creed you've ever seen. Just yesterday I was doing a review, and in my review I'm running through the rolling hills of England, and this torrential downpour starts coming towards me, and all of a sudden I'm in this maelstrom of rain, and it was breathtaking. The game is breathtaking. It's beautiful. We have incredible artists and technical artists and rendering programmers. Again, Dark Age England, Norway. It's breathtaking.
That sounds incredible. It feels like there's no time like the present to find yourself in the rolling hills of England under torrential downpour. What I would give to go there. On this show, what we like to do towards the end is ask the chat, ask each other a kind of question of the day. Our question for today was, if you could choose an Assassin's Creed setting or a time period, what would you do? Now, you kind of, by virtue of your job, you've answered that question. So I was hoping to take us kind of into the room. What does it look like when your team is deciding on a setting? What goes into that? Take us into that scene.
Yeah, so there's on every project it's been different. It's let's call it it's an organic process. Of course, Assassin's Creed is an important brand for Ubisoft. Whatever setting we choose, it's something that usually has to be presented properly, pitched properly to the upper management to get the thumbs up. And specifically for Valhalla, very early on, I was given the opportunity to pitch a new setting. So that was my mandate. Ash pitched us a new setting. For me, it was going to be Vikings. There was, it was my number one choice because of a personal love that I have for the time period, the culture, something that started when I was very, very young. That's another story. If we had time, I'll get into it later. But when I was given that opportunity, I received that mandate personally from our CCO. I went to the team. I sat with my, we were a small team at the time. I sat with my close core team members, and we said, okay, I want to do Vikings. And there was a unanimous, support and thrill for that. This was something that we sort of had been a little bit talking about and thinking, let's say near the end of Origins, but that was sort of the official moment. So it was, we put a pitch together. We did a bit of research. A few weeks to do some art, and then it was about not pitching, just saying Vikings. It was specifically, the time period. What is exciting about that moment in history? What are we even talking about and teaching about that culture and that history? So we do get into the details of it. Pitching the idea is quite more elaborate than just saying, one sentence. We might have that one sentence, but we're asking Ubisoft to believe in us and believe in a concept that we have. So we go to efforts to sell that. But again, it was, this one was quite quick, and it was, okay, so we're doing Vikings. Now it was more about what specific time period, and again, what are we trying to say about this time period in terms of Assassin's Creed?
Okay, that's a lot more elaborate than me giving you my personal preference, which is just basically pointing at a board and says ninjas, please. So
you can do that. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, I mean, I could go into more of the explanations why, but clearly a lot more work goes into it. So, Ash, I want to thank you so much for your time. A lot of great details here. I'm a lot more excited about the game than even I was before this conversation. So
amazing.
Yeah. So thanks so much.
Well, thank you. This was really great. Thank you for having me. This was quite wonderful.
Thank you for joining us.
Best of luck to you. Take care.
All right. Thank you very much, guys. Take care.
Thanks, Ash. Bye.
Bye.
All right, we're gonna bring Mike in here.
That was so heartwarming.